unforeseen circumstances. I think that while you're not second screen, you're definitely an awesome fill-in. Me and Autumn have worked together, for about 6 months, 8 months?
6 months, right?
Yeah,
We're
yeah.
gonna celebrate our anniversary soon, right?
Yes. So we've been working together, and through that time together, I've noticed that you're very good at what you do.
Thank you.
You've spoken on platforms on the behalf of some of our organizations that we've been working with. So this is a welcome opportunity to sit down and kind of talk about education, your background, and while mine is a path is a little bit different, I think that this is a great opportunity to share people of color in our struggles in education. So while this is kind of more of a conversation, this isn't structured. We're just kind of hit the tennis ball back and forth, and we'll just kind of do it like that. So I'll have Autumn start first, ladies before gentlemen. And won't you tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we can kind of go into the education aspect.
No, absolutely. So thank you, Roland, for that introduction and just kind of giving them the background of how we came into this space together and how that's going to shape our conversation. I think it's important, first and foremost, that we all take a collective breath, right? Just breathe in and breathe out. I think that's important to do because often when we enter these conversations, at least for me, there's a lot of anxiety to be right about what you're talking about and to be fully informed. And I say, first and foremost, as a human being, and then next as an educator in that right, that you have to practice cultural humility and open the door to give yourself grace and others grace to be wrong, but to follow up with a learning opportunity to correct that. And so when I'm entering the space, especially with somebody of your caliber, who has had a plethora of experiences within your humanity, but also in your line of work as an advocate, it's important for us to recognize too that we're allowed to have differences in our Black humanity at that.
Absolutely.
And so when we're going to be talking about education, we have to allow ourselves the room for it to not look the same and to let that be a truth in and of itself. Matter of fact, I've heard this multiple times, and this phrase came this week when I was interviewing a candidate for our Associate Director of Institutional Diversity at Allegheny College. And he reminded me that there are two truths. There's your truth, and then there's the truth.
I like
right?
that. I like that.
I like that too. I was like, let me write this down right before I forget again. But even in that, I was thinking the truth is we have to all allow our own truths to exist. Whether or not we like them, it happened.
Right.
So I just want to encourage you and I today and everybody who is coming into this space, whether virtual or in person, to just allow it to be for what it is, but to also take ownership as human beings who are trying to better ourselves and each other, to ask for clarity, to challenge one another, and just provide again that room for grace and education. And so now that we've taken that breath, now that we've kind of established that norms of letting truths exist for what they are, your truth, my truth. My name is Autumn Parker. I am an Erie native. I am also a career counselor at Allegheny College. And quite frankly, I have lived outside of the state in Ohio particularly, and I didn't want to come back to Erie, for real.
I can understand that.
For real, I did not want to come back. I was like, there's nothing there in Erie for me, although, I grew up in a two-parent household. My dad works for Jet TV. So I've seen a lot of the video footage of the different spaces and areas of Erie. But let's be honest, a lot of those spaces were predominantly white spaces and very, I would say, affluent. And if there was any people of color, it was very in the under-resourced, very underdeveloped areas. And I was like, I don't want to be that person that's visualized on that screen.
Right.
So let me get out of there. And I did, but life brought me back. And I'm still trying to figure out entirely why, but I can see it finally piecing together that I have a responsibility to show folks that there is life, especially for Black and brown people in Erie, PA. And we have to work together and as a collective effort to show what that looks like outside of the mainstream images.
Absolutely.
Right? And so I'm really curious to learn too, since you've been here since 1995, I read you were a Pittsburgh native, of how you were able to, navigate these spaces and really be able to articulate through your own imaging and graphics of what the Black experience and the spectrum of it can look like.
Well, it was a journey, definitely. Being from Pittsburgh, being from the inner city, you come into this space and it's almost like a culture shock. I didn't have a lot of experience understanding what Erie was. The lake never came up to like a lot of older people say, well, yeah, we used to go up there all the time to fish, so that was not my truth. I'm concrete jungle through and through, you know what I mean? Like I have no idea about any of this stuff, until I got started to get exposed to, my journey here was through education. So in 11th grade, I went to what they call the Governor's School for the Arts. It's a program now that has been defunded, but it took kids from all over the state and gave them opportunity to come and learn in a space with all other artists. So whether you're in fine arts, theater, music, and dance, they had classes for the summer. And then I went to IUP, and then I met my children's mother there, and we ended up having kids together. So that kind of brought me here. So I said, I'm gonna go be with my kids. And it was a culture shock. So the first, I would say 15 years of being here, I'm just a inner city kid just trying to make it. And you're right, there are a lot of white spaces, not a lot of opportunity to grow here. So trying to find work. I also sensed at an early age here that there was a defeatist attitude. So while I was a go-getter, I seen a lot of people allow an opportunity to pass them by. So not to say that people used excuses not to be better or to get better jobs. I came here and I accept. While I started humbly, I came up here with a job. I looked online and I found a guy who was doing cleaning. He had like contracts. He was a small businessman and he was looking for help. So that was my first job here when I touched down. I had a job before I even got here. And that didn't work out. Then I started working for Kmart. And I had to walk from Buffalo Road in Downey all the way all the way to the east side Kmart. That was in that plaza. I used to walk that walk.
Not I.
So, but like I said, I'm from Pittsburgh, so that was, I didn't come up here with a car. I didn't have resources. I didn't even have a driver's license at 20-something years old. I always drove illegally, so I didn't have one. So nevertheless, I did notice that right away that I seen a lot of people stagnant, happy with where they were at. And I know you're familiar with Hammer Mill, now closed. Through a few years of coming and going, I was able to get into Hammer Mill. And through a couple of layoffs and the closing, I'm not there anymore. And then I worked my way up to going to General Electric. And like I said, not a lot of Black people in those spaces, but I didn't allow it to stop me. Now, while I'm up here, I did not think to go to school. That was, I don't know why that, even though I flunked out of IUP, it just, that wasn't where I was at. You know what I mean? So I was just a worker. So I can see how being Black, not being able to get the funding, not having resources, not having help. Once you get into life and you have children and that's and so very difficult to go back to school. So that was not even on my mind. I was trying to raise a family. So just working. But I did notice that right away that a lot of people seem stagnant.
Absolutely. As you were talking and sharing your story, your journey, I was identifying some common themes in sharing that defeatist mentality, also that self-efficacy, because I think that's important, right? To talk about how your upbringing, your environment is also integral into informing how you navigate external. And for me, I grew up in a really, I would say, positive household with my mom and my dad, who informed my brother and I have a younger brother, his name is Michael, and he's a mechatronics engineer out in Kent, Ohio.
Wow.
Yes, I still don't know what that means, but I know he's doing big and incredible things working for Goodyear specifically, and helping them become, more accessible, right, with their own services and so forth. But, going back to my upbringing, my parents were always honest about the fact that, yes, your brown skin can be seen as a threat to others, can impede others from wanting to give you an opportunity, but don't let that be a crutch for you to continue looking for opportunity.
Absolutely.
And so for me, I was like, okay, let me continue to live my life. And I love to read. I loved being active, and so did my brother. But I noticed within our educational environment, particularly with my Black peers, and even some of my white peers, they're like, oh, you an Oreo. They're like, why are you talking to the teacher?
Yeah.
Like they're your friend. Are you in the corner of the library reading a book? Or why do you have so many friends across the spectrum? Like you're not Black enough.
Mm-hmm.
And quite frankly, I wasn't able to process that as a child, as this is a reflection of really our education system informing us what we can and can't do.
Smart didn't equal Black.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
I didn't have that language at that time. But for me, I have to own that it did influence the way in which I saw not only my Black peers, but myself. I was like, okay, I don't belong in this space. I belong with my white peers,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so there was moments where I saw myself yearning, even like putting a towel on my head in my bedroom to be white, because it seemed that that was going to lead me to more opportunities, right?
Wow, that's powerful.
Right?
Yeah.
And thinking about that as a child in 5th grade, already having that kind of information feed into my psyche, into my cognition, did influence the way in which I moved into high school,
Mm-hmm.
right? And thus my decision to go to Allegheny College. In high school, I went to Collegiate Academy. And it's a very prestigious school. And that in and of itself was an environment that there wasn't a lot of Black and brown folks. In fact, we had a lot of Bosnian and immigrant students in that space. And I could see them grappling too, of trying to find that sense of belonging, right? It was like the non-white folks and then the white folks.
Well, you were almost stuck in a conundrum. So you don't quite belong with all the white kids,
right?
Because you don't have that background, but your typical Black student, you don't have that either.
Right.
Because unfortunately, I don't like the stereotype, but we know that we do have a lot of broken homes, right?
We do.
So the nuclear family isn't something that's necessary. I know I didn't come from a nuclear family.
Sure.
So that's just in itself, just on this panel,
Mm-hmm.
you know, my upbringing was way different than yours.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Where I didn't have a mother and a father at home. And I often even say now today that doesn't equal success either, especially if the parents aren't engaged.
Right.
So there's taking care of your children and then there's parenting your children.
Exactly.
So to give you that space to excel, to be smart, to read books, you know, you had positive influences at home, which allowed you to excel. So how did you feel coming out of high school, going into making your choice for Allegheny? How did you come to that understanding that this is something that you needed to do as a young Black girl, saying, okay, I know I got to go to school. I'm not going to be around a lot of people that look like me.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you navigate that?
I was so used to being the Black sheep in the space.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I preferred that, because at that time, I thought it was a great use of my ability to show I'm not the stereotypical Black person. In fact, let me be an example to you of what it looks like to be a Black scholar, an intellect.
Wow.
And so it's almost like this irony of not trying to subscribe, but also trying to combat that subscription,
Mm-hmm.
to give hope that this is not all of us. This is not the brokenness, the bitterness of Black America that is perpetuated in our society. We have hope, we have drive. We want to live, we want life.
And that's your thought process at 18 years old, 17, 18 years old?
Yes, and
that's amazing.
Listen, I give really my parents a credit for feeding that self-efficacy though. That's where it comes back to believing that I still could do it.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you told me I can't or it would be hard, I'd be like, bet, I'm gonna find a way though.
Right.
And my father, you know, he went to Allegheny, so there's also that legacy there. Mm-hmm. And my mom, she got her certification out of community college.
So he went, or did he graduate?
He graduated from Allegheny, and that in and of itself was a very hard obstacle.
But I'm laughing, embracing it, saying that heaven legacy
Mm-hmm.
is a very, very powerful statement, because a lot of Black children, especially Black boys, don't have that image to look up to in education. So we can learn all day long that education is important. You know, people tell us all the time, oh, go to college. But the only reason why I even enrolled in college is because my friends were going. I met, and prayerfully one day they can see this. I actually just reconnected with them. There's Monica, Michelle, Anere, Jacques, and Sean, and myself. So there's 7 of us. We all met at the Governor's School for the Arts. 7 Black kids, and I think there was probably another half dozen Black kids there. Not a lot of us, but enough of us. Your typical 15, 20%, right?
Yep.
But we bonded.
Which is quite high, right?
Yeah,
Believe it or not,
absolutely.
we got 20%.
So the majority, so we're from Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. So 3 of us lived in Philly, 3 of us the rest of us lived in Pittsburgh, and we all bonded. Literally, the guy that I met that summer was my Sean from Philly. He was my roommate at IUP.
Wow.
Yeah, that's like literally that's why I
Wow.
went. I enrolled because of them. Didn't have the scores, didn't have anything. Probably had like, what do they say you get on SAT 200 for your name? I had 250.
That's what you got, 250.
I literally was
At least
there.
you went above,
Yeah, well, and it was lucky to draw because I was I'm just here I knew I was in.
How did you feel though, knowing that you didn't necessarily have the academic credentials?
Didn't care.
You didn't care.
I keep bringing this up to Lisa. There's a young man, an art educator who came. He's an artist. He was a visiting artist here at the university. And I always forget his first name, but it's Lugo. His last name is Lugo. And I use his quote where he said he always felt as though he was going to get a tap on the shoulder because he didn't belong. And I thought about that. As he was saying, I thought about that long and hard. And I said, wow, I thought that in this regard, I knew I didn't belong, but I didn't care. I kicked in doors, man. That's what I did. So when I went to school, I was me. I didn't try to that's why I said that was interesting what you said. I didn't try to put on airs. I just was authentic me all the time. And from friends, from older cousins, from my uncle, those things, my dad too, but life in general shaped my personality. So I'm not trying to claim I was some thug or I was off the chain. I mean, I spent 4 years in fine arts in high school from 9th grade to 12th grade being tutored by, bless her soul, she's passed now, Ann Marshall. She was like my mentor. So it's not like I was like super hard or nothing, but I just was authentically me, just a kid from together, you know what I mean? So I knew I didn't belong in these spaces, but I didn't care. So I went to school and me and Lisa talked about this where I'm sitting in my first art class. So first day, they put up on the screen 50 slides, or they go through 50 slides. We had a test first day. Name the artist, name the time period, and name the style, genre. And I literally couldn't answer not a one.
Had you seen those images before?
99%.
Or they were completely new to you? You're like, I don't
99% of them, I had no idea what they were.
When you're thinking about it now, what's like flickering in your mind, these images? Were they predominantly white-centric images? Were they?
Absolutely. So, your typical Picasso and, even to this day, I don't know a whole lot of artists.
Good, because I don't either. Like, yeah. Don't ask me any questions.
So I'm looking at these and I'm literally shaking my head. Like, I didn't feel defeated or nothing, I don't think, but I definitely knew, this, I don't think I'm gonna make it through this because I had not been prepared. And as a matter of fact, I've been watching a little bit of documentaries and stuff speaking about this, about education and how our route from even this new route of the seemingly better charter school. Black students, when they navigate through high school, they're just not getting the same education as white kids. So when they step into these college spaces, or let's say they go to law school or something like that, generally, such as myself, they flunk out because they are so ill-equipped to even really be there. Now, don't get me wrong, you can be the cream that rises to the top that says, I'm gonna work super hard, like kind of what you spoke of. I'm gonna prove everybody wrong. But it's hard when you're ill-equipped to really even be in these spaces.
So let's talk about that. sense of being equipped or being prepared, because I think that in and of itself is a crutch to
Mhm.
becoming your true authentic self. Because while I was prepared at collegiate to enter Allegheny with high academic rigor and those expectations, I had my own culture shock where I saw more folks who looked like me.
Oh, okay.
Yes. It was only at Collegiate Academy that I had, I would say, like a small group of Black and brown friends, because Collegiate didn't have their own sports team. So
Okay.
we had to go to either Central or what's the other one? Strong Vincent.
Mhm.
So I went to Strong Vincent and I played volleyball, and that's where I met the majority of my Black friends at the time.
Mhm.
And that was even difficult because they were like, were you adopted by white folks? And I was like, no, so since I have an education and you can hear me coherently, I must have been raised by white people.
Speaking white.
Right.
Yeah.
But even in that, right? So I finally got to Allegheny and I didn't feel prepared on a social level.
Interesting.
And that really influenced me, or not influenced me, that impacted me to start really reflecting on who am I?
Mhm.
Because that preparedness was really me code switching so I could survive in a white space predominantly. All that education I was given of, in 1492, Columbus sailed all that crap, right? That was so I could pass the test, though.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But it's not true. And so when I got to Allegheny and I started being able to take classes of my own choice,
Mhm.
not that was within the core curriculum, which is what we find in primary education, K through 12, I got to this higher education space where I was like, oh, so I can take this Black Studies class and I can learn more about who I am and what my past or what our nation's past has, influenced our today's way of navigating the space. I was scared because I was like, I really am not Black enough because I don't even know myself, really.
Right.
So I got into these classrooms and I had all of these peers, predominantly Black peers, who were like shooting off the cuffs, all of these names, like Ellis and the Invisible Man or Toni Morrison and things like that. And I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Right. And so that was an adjustment for me to start preparing myself to learn about myself
Mhm.
in a really raw, ugly way. And I wasn't ready for that initially. But I became ready once I found a community of folks who could give me that grace and said, let's take time to reflect on where you were and how that influenced the way in which you have become now.
Well, think about this then. So if you had a difficult time socially,
Mhm.
just imagine a kid who he got pushed through school,
Yeah.
which happens a lot, right? So an A today isn't the same A it used to be,
Mhm.
right? Even in college, they say all of these 4.0s aren't really what they were 20 years ago, right?
Right.
So an inner city A is not the same as a county A.
Sure is not.
Okay, so we're talking math, English, um, um, let's say finance. I know we don't necessarily learn finance in high school,
Mhm.
but I would say if I was the stereotype, I would say white kids from nuclear white homes learn a little bit more about finances, being, let's say, lower middle class to mid uh, uh, middle class, right? So that means you have a car, you own a home, you understand mortgage, stuff like that, right? Your parents are pushing for school where they can pay for it, you know what I
Yep.
mean? So whereas um, Black parents may not be able to do that, not just having the skill set to equip their children, but also be able to cut a check.
Right.
They're not necessarily worried about school so much because they can't even afford to go to school, right?
And part of that is generational wealth gap, as you know clearly, right?
Whole nother conversation, right?
Right.
We can go down that round. We had another 90 minutes, but absolutely. So my point in saying that is this: that when you enter into, you can be gung ho going into college.
Mhm.
You can get in on a scholarship. You can have pretty decent grades, numbers wise. But once you see the syllabus,
Yep.
for instance, my psych class, which I actually liked a little bit, but to go into an auditorium with 35, 45, 50 other kids. Show up, put your little book bag down, and the professor say, here's the syllabus, and walk out the room. No engagement whatsoever. You take it, you learn it, you basically teach yourself. You know, no engagement from the professor whatsoever. I knew nothing about that life.
So already going in, or like knowing I don't really belong in this space, and then having to sit in a space where you're not even seen, interacting with the professor. And that goes for everybody, but particularly you already feeling that as a Black person, like I don't belong in this space, and you kind of affirm it by not even interacting with me. Did that like kind of impact the rest of your navigation and not completing IUP of like, I just can't be left alone to figure it out? Like,
pretty much. I didn't have the skill set, the discipline to self-teach. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now, in other areas I excelled. I found the Black student lead. I excelled there. I brought speakers in. I met John Carlo Exposito. We brought in Karis, one to speak. We brought in Bradford Marcellus to play a tune.
you naming all kinds of people.
Oh, well, yeah. Look those up later for all the young people.
I'm just nodding my head like, okay,
Yeah, this was
later.
This was in the 90s, so those were all people that were popular. But nevertheless, yeah, I excelled in other places. Played a little recreational basketball. There was a nice little intramural league there. Met some great people from Philadelphia. So I got my social up. So I didn't struggle like you did. My social was strong.
Listen, I became strong after I solidified myself, and I was like, oh, okay. So now I can, honestly, now that I think about this, I got big mad once I started learning about the historical marginalizations and harm that Black America suffered through and overcome. And I was like, so all of these like things that my white peers were saying, like, oh, you're so pretty for a Black person, all these microaggressions that I would eat up. Because I was like, oh, this is still me being accepted. When I got into college and learning about all that, I was mad. Because I was like, at the end of the day, if I started acting otherwise, you would not have accepted me. And I didn't know what to do with that anger.
Now, how'd you know code switching that young?
I didn't have the language to call it code switching. I think that was just an innate part of being, you know, formed by one's environment that taught you how to survive and adapt.
Because I didn't learn that till a couple years ago.
I didn't learn that till college, that word, code switching.
Yeah.
They're like, you know, because when I was at the ABC House, which was the Association for Black, oh, they gonna kill me because I was on the board. Listen, it was the Black House. That's what we gonna say. It was the Black House on campus.
Not on the board, Autumn. You was on the board.
I was on the Association for Black Excellence. Okay, whatever. I'm not there anymore. Here it is. I would get into that house and I felt like I could breathe, and I would start kind of having like a little rhythm, a little edge in my voice, kind of like how I'm having now. And my friends would point out, they'd be like, that is not how you was talking in class earlier. I was like,
okay.
I didn't feel comfortable talking that way because I knew it would be stereotyped this kind of way, and I just didn't want that. And they're like, that's code switching, because you knew it wouldn't necessarily serve as a productive engagement in that space. You wanted to make others feel comfortable to interact with you, because that does translate to capital and opportunity. Right?
Yes. So don't we have to do that now?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Right. Absolutely. And even my boyfriend, Ian, he's white. And there are sometimes where like I'm going off and he's like, oh, I didn't know this part of you. And I was like,
culture shock.
Here I am. You know? Right. But it's part of our everyday lived experiences as Black and brown people to be this fluid body. Everything.
We have to be everything. Yes.
And then to be coming into this sense of self where you're like, oh, I don't have to be everything to everybody, and I can't be. It's almost like a disappointment, because I at least raised was like, you had to try to survive, just to do it. But now I'm like, I'm okay with risking some things, with losing some folks, with losing some opportunities that are not serving me anymore.
Okay.
Because that means I am compromising my sense of self to make you more comfortable, which leaves me feeling uncomfortable.
That's always been my struggle. I mean, I'm always been a bees with honey than vinegar type of guy as I got older and mature. Yeah. But you're right. You can't take away your authentic self, but in these spaces, you know, where we're talking about Black professors, or, you know, even working in, you know, front office positions and stuff like that, you know, we have to code switch a lot, right? So, you know, how do you gain footing to be able to excel upward mobility, if you're not somewhat removing a little bit of yourself?
But you know what's crazy, Roland? Is that doesn't even, that's not only limited to white spaces, because during my sophomore year going into my junior year, that summer, I was a 7th grade literature teacher in Birmingham, Alabama, part of the Breakthrough program. And the majority of my students were Black, and incredibly intelligent, incredibly driven. And I felt like I was at home in a sense. And that I could relate to their notion of, yes, I'm aware that my Black skin may be a detriment to some spaces, but I'm gonna still push past that. But then I started teaching 8th grade math with city year in inner city Cleveland, in a room full of Black students who had no reading skills, who could not multiply double digits. And as soon as they saw me, they were like, just because you look like me don't mean you know what I'm going through. Not all skin folk are kinfolk, right? As we heard. And they whipped me in shape real quick. They're like, you come up here in your little Chevy car, you got a 2-parent household, you getting paid, you get to leave this space and go to your penthouse apartment. And you come in here telling me, being upset at me that I didn't bring a pencil to class. You don't know me. And I felt like I had to code switch in that space. I was like, oh, I gotta put on my armor today because I'm gonna get my feelings hurt. And I got my feelings hurt. But it was reality. I had to accept that even as a Black person, there's a spectrum of our experiences that protect us in a sense that didn't always allow me to relate to my Black peers and to my students. And I had to break down those barriers by simply reminding them, I'm not here to criminalize you, even though this education system makes you feel that way. I would take my time just to hear their story. How did you get to class today? Oh, I walked. My mom's working her 3rd shift. Okay. And you're taking care of your 4 siblings? How'd you feed them this morning? Just those conversations to get to know them. And that taught me that I have to be present as well in my life and not always be thinking ahead of how I'm gonna gain all this capital to get myself ahead. If I'm stepping on other people in the process too.
That's a huge problem today. Let's shift it back to like Erie, PA, right? So what was it? Probably 5-6 years ago, we had a big downsizing of schools, a lot of shifting. They closed a couple of the high schools, pushed a lot of kids into used to be Central. Yeah, it used to be Central, turned into Erie High, and kind of turned our school system upside down. Me, myself, I have a PTA background. I was PTA treasurer for, I think, 3 years and a president for 2 years. So very involved in my children's middle school life. When they transferred to high school, I kind of stepped back a little bit.
Why was that?
I believe it's because the school that they went to didn't really have a really good established PTA already. And I think I did another year of a program called SPAC, which is a parent advocacy group out of Pennsylvania. We used to meet quarterly in Harrisburg. So I had Slade to that. And then just life, you know what I mean? Involvement with kids' sports. I think my daughter was playing volleyball, and she was on a traveling team too. So we kind of stepped back from a lot of that work. But being in the schools and whatnot, you know, especially Erie schools, a lot of teachers are white, right? White and women, okay? So when you're speaking about engagement with students, having that thought process, regardless if you come from a 2-parent household or not, you're not bougie that you don't have an understanding of what it's like to be Black, right? Even though someone may try to put that on you, you're still Black, right? You grew up Black. So I don't think you necessarily have the answer today, but even just posing it to the people is how do non-Black teachers engage with students to make their life better so they can navigate those spaces where I have all of this going on. Like you said, I had to get my little brother and sister off to school before I could even think about myself. We didn't even eat breakfast.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? I might have forgot my lunch tickets, or I'm not on the lunch program because my mother, my mother, not parents, my mother makes $5 more than the cutoff.
Mm.
So we really still can't afford it, but they're
Right.
not gonna give it to us, right? So whatever situation that is, how do we get white teachers to engage with students in a more humane way? To care about what's going on in their non-school life so they can be successful. Because while we've journeyed all the way here, right? This conversation has been about education. And I think I would be remiss if I didn't try to get us to a solution.
Yeah.
Two different upbringings, two different age brackets, and two totally different journeys, right?
Mhm.
So for a kid coming up like me today, how do we help that kid to give them a better foothold? What can we tell the teacher? The ones that don't care, we're not even worried about them. I'm talking about the ones that do care, that just don't have it in their toolbox to have that understanding. What would you say that we would need to get them to understand or give them in resources to be able to help them students?
I'm a big proponent of asking always the why behind the what. Why are you here in this space? And often
The student or the teacher?
the teacher,
Gotcha.
why are you here in this space? Because when I think about my AmeriCorps experience and a lot of my white peers who were excited to educate these Black and brown students, there was a sense of saviorism in their tone. It's like, why are you here? And a lot of them were like, I want to prove I'm not racist.
Wow.
I'm like, let's start there. So it's really having these humanistic, raw conversations that aren't tailored around this notion of capital, trying to get something out of someone that's going to
Better you.
better me.
Yeah.
Right?
Or make you feel better about yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right? Because I think that's a lot of the premise behind conversations. What can I get out of you that I can use to help propel me?
Exactly.
Right? It's more of like, how can we have these conversations that get us to a collective space of unity? And part of that requires hard conversations that also mean reflecting upon your own truth that you have yet to accept. And so with those white teachers, it's really sitting down with yourself and folks who don't look like you and being honest about what led you to the space and how that has influenced your why. Because once you understand that, then that's gonna help better give you insight to how you approach your students, how you engage with them. If you're trying to prove I'm not racist and you going over to Jamal and you're saying problematic things that are stereotypical, we can't do that. You got to ask Jamal his story first, just like I asked you, because every person is different. Just like you and I, every Black experience is different. You got to take time to get to know it, tailor it to how you educate them, because that's also learning styles too.
Right.
So that's really where I think we got to start, is that humanistic approach of asking what's your why behind the what of your presence here.
I like that. Because I've had some pretty traumatic situations that could probably break a lot of kids. I was told by a teacher probably, I don't know, 4th, 5th grade, in front of my parents, that I told the class that I wanted to be a pimp when I grew up.
I see your wife over there going,
Didn't even understand the concept.
Yeah.
Didn't even understand the concept, right? This is 1978, 9, somewhere around there. I was born in 72, you're in the 4th grade, or maybe early 80s, right? So you're coming out of that era. how you dress, bell bottom, stuff like that.
Y'all was fly back in the day.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
80s and the 90s, y'all had some style.
And my dad, well, at the time, not with my mother, was still there supporting. And when they came in, best believe they looked like new money. So there could have been some animosity. I don't know, because like I said, they was clean. When they came on, my dad stayed clean, and my mom was fly too. So you know what I mean. I used to get, because my dad was out of the home. He would come and get me and ride me up the street to take me to school, and I would get bag lunches. This is when I'm in middle school. I mean, grade school. At the beginning when things was good. So my academic, like I got a picture to this day that I'm pretty proud of. Almost 50 years old, I'm still proud of this picture. 5th grade graduation, I graduated with you can see in the picture, it's a little gold pin on my lapel, most improved. Yeah, most improved. So I was pretty proud of that. And I had a suit on, had hard bottom shoes, tie, whole down, I was looking clean. I was in a play in the 1st grade where I married. I was in a wedding, and I got married in the 1st grade.
That was your first marriage.
Yeah. She's still jealous about that too.
I see your daughter over there.
And I was clean. I had a white suit on. You know what I mean? So it's funny because when I think about my journey, and give me a second, me and my soapbox, right?
No, listen, go for it. Make sure it's stable for you. There you go.
So soapbox time, guys. So when I think about this journey and coming to this space even today, you're talking about what 30-something years of academics in and out, bouncing around, not having an understanding of even what you're doing. Going to high school, I didn't miss a lot of school. I wasn't the skip school class type of guy. But I had some struggles. Math wasn't one of my strongest suits. I didn't spell real good, so I had a spelling teacher told me, "Oh, you don't spell good because you're Black." Yeah. So I was so defeated in high school that I had an English class. You could pick your book report, and I decided to do it on the autobiography of Malcolm X, and I literally didn't even do it. Yeah, how stupid is that? You got to pick the topic. It's on something that I know about. I've read the book, just didn't turn it in. End up failing a half a semester of English. Behind that, when I was in the 12th grade, I had 2 Englishes. Yes, I actually had to go to summer school, night school, before I went to college.
But did that sense, right, that subconscious of already feeling defeated debilitate you from turning in? Did you feel that? It was like, it's not going to produce anything.
At that time,
No.
At that time, it was, like I said, like a discipline. I knew I had to accomplish some things in order to get to the next rung up the ladder, but I didn't have a life set up conducive to encourage me through that. So a lot of these kids in high school right now, you're already dealing with your A not really being an A. You're already struggling with your money situation, right?
Yep.
I can't even imagine growing up today. Like I got 2 daughters, and I often praise them because they grew up in a time of social media. So you have to live a certain way. You have to present yourself a certain way. We didn't have that growing up. You know what I mean? So that's an extra added pressure.
Do you mean where it was so like instantly displayed?
Exactly, the pressures of living up and being a particular somebody.
But that's a crutch too, is always expecting that immediate gratification. And that's where it comes back to, like, still, I guess it really does go back to your upbringing of making sure that you're secure in yourself. If you don't have the external lifting you up, you still feel secure in yourself.
That's my point.
Yeah.
But if those broken home,
Yeah.
Your surroundings, we're often shaped by our environment, right? So what do they say? Nature or nurture, right? I often say the majority of the stuff that Blacks have turned into is all nurture. We're not naturally disposed to be a certain way.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Now they like to put that on us,
Mhm.
just like I said, oh, because you're black, you can't spell. Well, I'm just sure there's plenty of black people that can spell. I know my wife can spell. She can spell real good. You know what I mean? Even my kids are good readers. They don't like to read in front of people, but they read when we engage and stuff like that. They read. My kids are smart.
Yeah.
But right now, not right now, always being smart was never cool, right?
Yeah.
And now you have social media that hinders you. So when I'm navigating the space, it's more what I see in my neighborhood, right? So I didn't have that encouragement to say, I got encouraged to go to college because I met some really cool guys and girls over the summer
Right.
of '89.
Right.
Had no thought to say, oh, I'm gonna go to school and I'm gonna be this.
Mhm.
Had no hopes and dreams of that. I went to school for art education because I was affected by how my art teacher dealt with me. White woman took me, my art, and I was pretty good. So she took my portfolio and she took me to Seton Hill College in her own vehicle on her own time.
Yeah.
I didn't need a permission slip. I told my grandmother, all right, well, I won't be around all day. I'm headed somewhere. You seriously walked down to the school, met me at the school, took me in her car. This is way back in the day. She had a Honda Civic with no radio. Back then you could buy a car with no radio because it was like an extra $500 to add the radio. No radio. We're driving with just our thoughts, right?
I feel so privileged having that come automatically with my car now, you know what I'm saying?
So, like I said, soapbox time. It's like this young black kid riding with this white woman, 45 minutes away from his hometown. At that point, the only place I've ever been was Canada, and it was because I went with my school when I was in middle school. Hadn't even been out of the city before that. I didn't grow up with family that lived down south, or you know what I mean?
Right.
We went away for the summer. We went to Geauga Lake. I didn't grow up like that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? All my experiences happened after IUP. You know what I mean? When I dropped out, if I've been anywhere from the East Coast to the West Coast, it was because I was an adult, because I promised myself when I got the ability to, I was going to see everything that I could see. But I didn't grow up that way. So that's what I'm saying. So you're talking about navigating spaces as a black kid. We always like to look at, so for instance, so let's take the 10 richest black people in America.
I can only name 3 of them, maybe 2. Oprah and Tyler Perry. Who else next?
Jay-Z.
Oh yes, Jay-Z and Beyonce.
Jay-Z's a billionaire. Beyonce's not. There's a brother who is nope, she's not a billionaire. There's a brother that's his last name's Stewart, I think. He is a hedge fund guy.
Okay.
I think he's the second richest, and then there's a guy who's a tech guy. He's the first. So it goes him, them 2 guys. Think Oprah, Jay-Z. Think Michael Jordan's on there. Kanye didn't snuck on there. But anyway, that's beside the point. So we take a big old kitty, right? And let's say we want to try to cure something that's wrong in the black community, right?
Mhm.
I would say probably 90% of us would say, write a check to a college, right? Because we've been programmed to not think. When I say think, I don't mean to try to say that it's not this way, but we've been programmed that school is the way out of poverty, right?
Yeah.
So give money to a school. So if we already know that these spaces aren't spaces where we're necessarily, I won't say welcome, but we don't necessarily have guaranteed access to, meaning there's a small percentage of us there, then I would say that isn't the smartest move, right? Because you're locking out so many of us because we don't have access to school, right?
Mhm.
So, you go to school, you get an education, unless it's free, unless you get a free ride, you take out loans, you come out of school with debt, huge debt, right? Even for white families, that's a big weight right now, right?
It is.
So while we know that education is a good way, at least one way out. Instead of giving money to the school, why not make it so I have for each student, I have $100,000 waiting for you when you graduate.
Hmm.
You want to go to school? Cool. $100,000, your school's paid for a free ride. You want to open up a business, come out with a business plan, $100,000 or let's say 20. We'll spoon feed it to you. We'll give you 3 opportunities, 20, 20, 20, start a business, right? Let's say you don't want that. Let's say you don't want to start a business. Let's say, but you don't want to go to school or college. Let's learn a trade.
Mhm.
What's the top 5 trades in your region? Boom, $100,000 is paid for that. Or we can set you up with some type of, not a stipend, but some type of, not savings, but something that we can invest this money for you that you can pull off of in so many years. So you can pinch off of it, interest and all of that stuff like that. So we'll make you a mutual fund. We'll give you $100,000 mutual fund as soon as you step out and you can go into the workforce. But now your retirement setup that is growing. Why can't we give people choices? Right now, you can be a kid from the ghetto, graduate high school and walk into a 4-year school and be given hundreds of $1,000s in loans.
Mm.
But even with the best business plan, you can't get $5,000, let alone $100 to open up a business.
Because the root of education was never meant to give Black America choices. Real talk.
Mm.
And I'm immediately thinking of James Baldwin, right?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely phenomenal author, preacher, human. And he said he went to France in one of his documentaries because he needed a breathing room and to identify where his Blackness ended and began.
Mm-hmm.
He wanted a choice to decide who he would become for himself.
Right.
And the different pathways that could lead to for his career. Our education system was meant to get Black people to stay in line and to say you only have really one avenue to go, because otherwise you will remain in poverty. And matter of fact, we want you to remain marginalized because you becoming the majority decreases white America's choices. That's what the threat was. That was the lie fed, the narrative. And so I think that's where we're in this space of an identity crisis where America's like, oh, people want choices to step outside of the stereotypical one-dimension box we have fed them this narrative of,
Right.
and become more. And that's why I have a lot of my students in my office, a lot of Black students who come into my office and they're like, I didn't even want to come to college. I came here because of my friends.
Even to this day.
Even to this day, because they feel like I don't belong here. I'm supposed to be somewhere else. But this gave them an opportunity to become more, a higher education. And it's scary for them because they're like, oh, I have an option to do that? Because being in that box actually gave me a sense of comfort because at least I knew where I was going.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in your office because I don't know where I'm going.
Not a clue.
Not a clue. And I break out this stack of cards, their career cards, and we do this career card sort, and it's about 75 to 90 cards. Mm-hmm. And you should see their eyes. It also almost makes me get emotional. You see their eyes and they get big and they get excited. And they're like, I can do this, I can do that. Absolutely. Who told you you couldn't?
Mm-hmm. Now, how do they engage with you being in that position?
They have a community. That's what and that goes back to what you were saying. You had a teacher, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who was able to take you outside of your one-dimensional world and show you there's more. You have choice.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to commend Allegheny for having that small network, but it's a strong one of Black, brown, and white folks who are really intentional about being mindful of our education system was not created right to give that choice. And so since we have that framework, that understanding, we're going to combat that by making sure that we are connecting students to choice. And so they will tell them, especially the first years when they get on the campus, you need to be going to the career education office and talking with Miss Autumn. And a lot of them will step in, they scared. Oh, Roland, they are scared. They're like, I was told to come to you and talk to you about my life. And I'm like, okay, take a seat. This is your home. This is a brave space. What's said in here stays in here. What's going on? They're like, well, this professor told me I need to come to you. Okay, you did that. Now, why are you here? Because you still have to make the choice to follow up on that. And many of them just want to have more language to articulate themselves and what they want. And that's why they're in my office, is because it frees them to talk about what they can do. Because somebody believed in them and said, I'm going to connect you to that next step for you to follow up on that. And so, it's, I'm trying to be mindful of time, but really, I think we got to sit back too and own that, yeah, we're having a shared language, but not the same definition. And education, to me, it's not about freedom just yet. Just yet. It's still about.
Somebody said that's reparations.
Really?
Bernie Sanders, I think he was trying to get like free education. He's not trying to take it political at all, but I remember that one of his talking points was trying to get education. But like I said, I struggle with that because not education isn't for everyone.
It isn't. And it's not going to free everybody and open the doors for what they want to do.
Exactly.
I firmly believe that higher education is a wonderful space and it can connect people to a larger world. But that's not the only space that can be done. And we have to allow the startup businesses you're talking about, if they want to go that entrepreneurial route, if they want to take a gap year and go travel, right? That $100,000 investment could be put towards that.
That's
we should allow that to
too.
exist. That is education.
That's
Living
education
is an education.
Absolutely.
And being allowed to live freely is your form of education. It don't have to be in a school.
Right. I like that. I like that a lot. So, Lisa, how are we doing on time?
We're doing very well. I think I want to hop in with a couple of points. We're actually in the Bruce Gallery, as we mentioned to begin with, but this is the show that's called Let's Pretend. That is the first, we believe, in Northwestern Pennsylvania that is solely by artists of color, organized by Dr. Leslie Sotomayor, who actually was teaching at Edinburgh, who's moved on to another position in Texas. And we chose very deliberately to place both of you in front of one of the works. This is by Armando Ruiz, and it's called Words Matter. And this show is going to be up until September 27th. And it's open Monday through Friday from 3 to 6. And as we sort of wrap up our conversation today, I just wanted to ask the two of you if there's anything about the topic which you were focusing on today, your own experience in education as a both in high school and then college, and even today what you're doing. But do you see any resonance between that and what the artist is doing here in the work? Is there any kind of connection that you can make?
When I first walked in here and I saw this, immediately the word intersectionality came to mind, right? And about how all of our experiences, all of our identities are so interconnected in a collective sense, and how we're quite either complicit or implicit in this system. And you may not be directly involved in, I'm pointing to this word of being part of the contractors in the zone in your neighborhood that's gentrifying, right? But how are you maintaining a sense of not wanting to be aware of how you got here that allows you to keep perpetuating this sense of ignorance, really, and marginalization? So I just think about how all of us, we need to be aware of our privileges, our biases, our prejudice, and just own them, because they're all built into the system in which we function and navigate.
Myself, being a part of this show, I think that for me, what it speaks to is opportunity.
Mm.
And I think that someone who has prided themselves on making my own way, I think that all of us needs a door open to opportunity.
Yep.
The gallery director, Lisa Austin, we've been working activism work for a long time, and she's almost what I would call my new mentor, replacing Ann Marshall as a woman who has taught me that the work that I do today is art.
Mm.
And I think that's also spilled over into my wife's life as well, where she has a piece in this show.
Yeah.
And for Edinburgh to allow Lisa to put on a show like this, even as Brother Marcus has a piece here that shows probably roughly 25 machetes. And the story behind that is speaking about the Haitian slave revolt. That's what that piece is about. And it projects a news report, and several of the other pieces really speak to the people of color's plight and the emotion and energy that comes out of their creativity. And I'm proud that Edinburgh could have the bravery
Yes.
to put a show on like this.
Yes.
With that being said, in Erie specifically, but the nation, we need more people, more institutions that take on that bravery aspect.
Yes.
We can beat doors down, and like I told you, we can even get our money together, pool our money together and do our own thing. But with that being less likely, especially with the ones who may have a mind to do it, don't have the resources to do it, non-people of color need to open these doors,
Yes.
not just for us, but for themselves. Because I always say, our success is your success.
Yes.
This isn't, for instance, they call February Black History Month. And many of us who are educated and have an understanding always push back and say, it's not Black history, it's history.
It's history.
You can't remove Black people out of America. We are interwoven into society, not just because of we're foundational, meaning we literally not laid the bricks that form this country.
We are the.
We I was gonna say made the bricks, but I like that.
We are
we are the bricks.
So my skin be rough in the knees.
Yeah. I like that better. We're actually literally the bricks that this country is built on. This country was built. Now, me, myself, there's a scene in a movie called School Days where Lawrence Fishburne says, I am 100% Black Nubian Prince. And the short lineage that I do have, which is through both my parents and I think she's been past 3-4 years now, my grandmother, who died in 98 years old, I think. That literally my parents picked cotton. I literally, just in 3 generations, can trace my lineage back to the plantation. You get what I mean? Like,
Yes.
I'm not, like, this is where I'm from. Master ain't been in my tent. I'm not from Africa.
Not directly.
Yeah,
But
I'm saying, I'm talking about literally from here.
Yeah.
This is where my people are from. I'm not going nowhere. I will die trying to get resources for our people. That's why I'm part of Erie We. That's why I work with you and Lisa on the things trying to get this program for redlining to come to Erie.
absolutely.
Because I've bought into helping our people here. While I may not be originally from this city, this is where I live now. So I'm going to fight for us together
Yes.
to bring those resources that I talked about. This right here is awesome. And I appreciate the opportunity as well.
I'm just so grateful to know you, right? And just be next to you, seriously, because essentially what you're getting at, especially with our work through Erie on trying to address redlining and how it is still very much a harmful, although not federally appointed, right? But it's still a harmful tactic being used. I'm just go to what I was gonna say. My Angelou this morning, I was doing my meditation, and I picked up this book that I was given by a dear friend, and I just flipped to it because I like to do random stuff. And it landed on her piece on society and culture. And when we were talking about, again, our work through Erie redlining, trying to bring awareness to how it still operates today, she says, the ache for home lives in all of us. The safe place where we can go as we are and not be questioned. And so I think we have to allow ourselves, just as you did, to make homes in different spaces and affirm that no matter where you're traveling, you still belong there. This is still your country. This is still your place to live here freely and be given that promise that our forefathers wrote and did not live out. And so you and I are here doing this hard work amongst others, you being here with us virtually, you being here with us physically. We all are risking some part of our sense of safety and comfort so that we can build a collective home where everyone belongs. So I just want to say thank you and thank all of you for taking the time and energy out of your day to be uncomfortable so we can create a more comfortable space for others to live in the future.
Well, we're coming to our end here. I'm just going to pop in and just share a little bit with you as we close out today. I just want to thank you very much, Roland, Slade, for being here today, Autumn Parker for sharing very candidly your experiences. And I want to say this whole, this talk and the one that's going to be next week on Wednesday, they're built out of actually an experience that we had bringing Aruna D'Souza here to the region. She was the juror for the spring show last year. And her book, Art, Race, and Power, led to the conversations within the Chroma Group up in Erie. And again, the Chroma Group is an offshoot of the Erie Arts and Culture. Patrick Fisher convened artists of color to create an organization. And that Chroma Group is represented very heavily here in this particular show. And next Wednesday, again, at 6 o'clock, the curator, Dr. Leslie Sotomayor, is going to join us from Texas via Zoom. And some of the artists who are in the show are going to be having a conversation with her about the work. I also want to point out that Dr. Rhonda Matthews, who was originally scheduled for today, will be back with us next year, returning to that topic of a debate really on the future of racist objects. But I want to point out that Dr. Matthews was also a part of this this show and actually wrote an essay about it. I'm only going to read you one line here that's in the catalog, which you're welcome to come read. But she writes that the work that you see here is the way forward to an engaged whole community. And it speaks really and echoes what you were saying about the hard work of having these conversations. So I do want to thank everybody who's been here and been a part of this, and goodbye.
Thank you.